The moment she whispered those words, everything changed. What started as a simple act of kindness became something that would transform both our lives forever. If you've ever wondered whether small gestures really matter, this story might just answer that question. Before I continue, if this resonates with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more stories that remind us of our shared humanity. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late October when I first noticed Mrs. Eleanor Winters struggling with her grocery bags. I'd lived in the Oakwood apartments for nearly 3 years but had barely exchanged more than polite nods with the elderly woman in 4B. The building was like that, a place where people lived side by side but rarely connected. Everyone too busy, too tired, or too wrapped up in their own worlds to truly see one another. I was returning from a particularly frustrating day at work. My boss had criticized my presentation in front of the entire team, my car had made that concerning rattling noise again, and to top it all off, dark clouds threatened rain just as I pulled into the parking lot. The last thing I wanted was to delay getting to my apartment, but something about the way Mrs. Winters hunched over her shopping bags made me pause. "Need some help with those?" I called out, already regretting the offer as the words left my mouth. I had deadlines to meet, emails to answer, and leftover pasta calling my name. She looked up, startled, as if amused to being addressed directly. Her face, lined with years I couldn't begin to count, registered surprise before softening into a grateful smile. "Oh, that would be wonderful, dear. If you don't mind." I crossed the parking lot and gathered most of her bags, surprised by their weight. How had she managed to carry these from the bus stop? I wondered, noticing for the first time how frail her wrists looked, how her cardigan hung loosely on her frame. "I'm Alex, by the way. From 2A. Eleanor," she replied. "Though most people call me Ellie." The elevator ride to the 4th floor was silent but not uncomfortable. When we reached her door, she fumbled with her keys, hands trembling slightly. I pretended not to notice, giving her the dignity of time. Her apartment was immaculate but frozen in time, floral wallpaper, doilies on armrests, and framed photographs that looked decades old. The air smelled of lavender and something baking. "Where would you like these?" I asked, holding up the grocery bags. "The kitchen, please. Just through there." I set the bags on her spotless countertop and turned to leave, duty fulfilled, conscience clear. "Would you like some tea?" she asked suddenly. "I just made a fresh batch of snickerdoodles this morning." I glanced at my watch. Emails. Deadlines. Pasta. "That would be nice," I heard myself say. As she busied herself with the kettle, I noticed how deliberately she moved, as if each action required thought and effort. She arranged cookies on a delicate china plate with a precision that spoke of years of practice. "My Harold always loved these," she said, placing the plate between us at her small kitchen table. "Said they were better than his mother's, though I suspect that was just to keep peace in the marriage." I smiled, taking a cookie. It was perfect, crisp edges, soft center, the right balance of cinnamon and sugar. "These are amazing," I said truthfully. She beamed, and in that moment, she seemed younger somehow. "Thank you for helping with the groceries. These old bones aren't what they used to be." It was no trouble. Still, it means a lot. Most days, I don't speak to a soul except maybe the checkout girl at the market. And she's usually too busy to chat. Something in her tone made me look up from my tea. There was no self-pity in her eyes, just a matter-of-fact acceptance that pierced me unexpectedly. "How long have you lived here?" I asked. "Going on 15 years now. Since Harold passed." I nodded, unsure what to say. Death was not a topic I navigated comfortably. "Do you have family nearby?" I ventured. A shadow crossed her face. "My son lives in Seattle with his family. They visit at Christmas, usually." "My daughter." She paused. "We don't speak much these days." As we talked, I learned that Eleanor had been a kindergarten teacher for 37 years. That she and Harold had traveled to all 50 states before his heart gave out during a trip to Maine. That she still wrote letters by hand to former students who were now grandparents themselves. When I finally glanced at my watch again, I was shocked to see that nearly 2 hours had passed. I should probably get going, I said, standing reluctantly. She walked me to the door, her steps measured and slow. As I turned to say goodbye, she reached out and squeezed my hand. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice suddenly thick with emotion. "I haven't felt wanted in years." The words hit me like a physical blow. I mumbled something, I don't even remember what, and hurried back to my apartment, her words echoing in my mind. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Eleanor, alone in her immaculate apartment with her memories and her snickerdoodles. About how she'd said those words without drama or expectation, just a simple truth that had been her reality for longer than I could imagine. The next morning, I knocked on her door with a flimsy excuse about borrowing sugar. The smile that lit her face told me she saw right through me, but she welcomed me in any way. It became a routine. Tuesday evenings, I'd help with groceries. Friday afternoons, we'd watch Jeopardy! Together, Eleanor consistently outperforming me with her encyclopedic knowledge of world capitals and Shakespeare quotes. Sometimes I'd bring takeout from restaurants she'd never tried, Thai food that made her eyes water but that she insisted was absolutely delightful, or sushi that she approached with scientific curiosity before declaring the tempura rolls not half bad. I learned that Eleanor had stories, so many stories, that no one had bothered to hear in years. She told me about growing up during the Depression, about meeting Harold at a USO dance when she was just 19, about the time she marched for civil rights and got arrested alongside her students' parents. "You would have liked Harold," she told me one evening as we looked through her photo albums. "He had no patience for pretense. Said what he meant and meant what he said." The man in the photographs had kind eyes and the same gentle smile I'd come to associate with Eleanor. In every picture, they were either looking at each other or laughing at some private joke. 52 years we had together, she said, tracing his face with a fingertip. And it still wasn't enough. As winter settled over the city, I noticed Eleanor seemed more tired, her breathing sometimes labored after climbing the stairs when the elevator was out of service. I started checking in more frequently, bringing soup when she caught a cold that lingered too long, making sure her heat was working properly. One evening in December, I mentioned that I'd be visiting my parents for Christmas. "That's wonderful, dear," she said, but I caught the flicker of something in her eyes. "What about your son? Is he coming to visit?" She busied herself with straightening the already straight doilies. "Not this year. Megan, that's his wife, her mother isn't doing well, so they're spending the holidays in Portland." "You'll be alone for Christmas?" The thought was unbearable. She shrugged. "It's just another day, really." That night, I called my mother. "Would it be okay if I brought someone with me for Christmas?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "A girlfriend?" My mother sounded hopeful. "No, Mom. My neighbor, Eleanor. She's 87 and she'll be alone otherwise." Another pause. "Of course she can come. I'll make up the guest room." When I invited Eleanor, she refused at first. "I couldn't impose on your family holiday." "You wouldn't be imposing. My mom's already planning the menu around your dietary restrictions." "You told her about my diabetes? And your dislike of Brussels sprouts?" She laughed then, a sound I'd grown to treasure. "Well, if she's gone to all that trouble." The drive to my parents' house took 3 hours. Eleanor brought homemade snickerdoodles and regaled me with stories of road trips with Harold in their old Buick, before interstate highways existed. My parents welcomed her like family. My father, usually reserved with strangers, was charmed by her sharp wit and genuine interest in his woodworking hobby. My mother found a kindred spirit in Eleanor's love of classic films. My younger sister taught her how to take selfies, and by the end of the visit, Eleanor had her own Instagram account with precisely 12 followers, all family members, but she was inordinately proud of each one. On Christmas morning, as we gathered around the tree, my mother handed Eleanor a package wrapped in silver paper. "You didn't have to get me anything," Eleanor protested. "It's nothing fancy," my mother assured her. Inside was a hand-knitted scarf in shades of blue that matched Eleanor's eyes. She ran her fingers over the soft yarn, her expression unreadable. "It's beautiful," she whispered, and then, to everyone's surprise including her own, she began to cry. My mother was beside her in an instant, arms around her thin shoulders. "I'm sorry, did I upset you?" Eleanor shook her head, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue my father had hastily provided. "It's just been so long since someone gave me a Christmas gift. Since Harold." The room fell silent. Then my sister, never one for heavy moments, announced, "Well, now you're stuck with us, Eleanor. Mom's already planning Easter dinner with you in mind." Eleanor laughed through her tears, and just like that, our family expanded by one. Back at the apartment complex, things changed. I introduced Eleanor to other neighbors, organized a weekly card game in the community room that had previously been used only for building meetings. Eleanor taught 3 of us how to make her famous snickerdoodles, though none of us could quite match her touch. In February, she developed a persistent cough. By March, she was using a portable oxygen tank. I drove her to doctor's appointments, sat with her as the pulmonologist explained terms like progressive pulmonary fibrosis and palliative care options. "I'm not afraid of dying," she told me on the drive home. "I've had a good life. But I was afraid of dying alone. Not anymore." In April, her son Michael flew in from Seattle. He was shocked by his mother's decline but grateful for the community that had formed around her. "She sounds happier on the phone these days," he told me. "More like her old self." Eleanor's daughter Claire arrived a week later, their first meeting in nearly a decade. I gave them privacy but later found Eleanor looking out her window, a peaceful expression on her face. "We talked," she said simply. "Really talked. Some wounds never fully heal, but they can scab over enough to let you move forward." By June, Eleanor needed more care than I or the other neighbors could provide. Michael found a hospice facility nearby, bright and cheerful with gardens visible from every room. We helped pack her most treasured possessions, the photo albums, Harold's watch, the blue scarf from my mother. The day before she moved, we threw a party in the community room. Nearly every resident of the building attended, each with a story about how Eleanor had touched their lives, advice given, cookies shared, a listening ear when it was most needed. "Who would have thought," she marveled as I wheeled her back to her apartment, "that at 87 I'd be the social butterfly of Oakwood Apartments?" In her final weeks, I visited daily. Sometimes we talked, sometimes I just sat beside her bed while she slept. One afternoon, I arrived to find her looking through her wedding album. "Harold was so handsome," she said, her voice wispy but clear. "He's waiting for me, you know. I can feel it." I took her hand, paper-thin skin over bird-like bones. "Tell him I said he's a lucky man." She smiled. "I will." Then, with surprising strength, she squeezed my fingers. "Thank you, Alex. For seeing me when I was invisible." Eleanor passed peacefully 3 days later, with Michael holding one hand and me holding the other. At her memorial service, the chapel overflowed with people, former students, neighbors, friends old and new. Claire spoke of reconciliation and second chances. Michael shared childhood memories that had us laughing through tears. I talked about grocery bags and snickerdoodles and the profound impact of simple kindness. Afterward, as we gathered at my apartment for a reception, I overheard one of Eleanor's former kindergarten students, now a grandmother herself, say something that stopped me in my tracks. "Ellie always told us that the greatest gift we could give another person was to truly see them. Not just look at them, but see them." It's been 2 years since Eleanor whispered those words that changed everything. I still live in the Oakwood apartments, though now I'm the building's community coordinator, an unofficial position that grew from the weekly card games and monthly potlucks that became Eleanor's legacy. I know the names of every resident. I check on Mrs. Patel when her arthritis flares up. I help Mr. Gonzalez with his English paperwork. I make sure no one goes too long without human contact. And every Tuesday, I bake snickerdoodles using Eleanor's recipe. They're never quite as good as hers, but they're made with the same intention, to let someone know they are seen, they are valued, they are wanted. Sometimes the most profound changes begin with the smallest actions. A hand reaching for grocery bags. A cup of tea offered and accepted. A moment of genuine connection in a world that makes it too easy to remain strangers. Eleanor taught me that. And in sharing her story with you now, I hope to pass along the most important lesson she left behind. We all have the power to make someone feel wanted. We just have to be willing to see them first. If this story touched you in any way, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Because in a world where it's easy to feel invisible, sometimes the greatest gift we can give each other is the simple acknowledgement that we are here, we matter, and we are not alone.